So, this guy won the German Karting Championship and WSK International Series in 2008, the German Karting Championship and CIK FIA European Championship in 2009, the CIK FIA World Karting Championship in 2010, and, just to show him who's boss, won the World Championship again the following year, along with the WSK Euro Series, I might add. This all being but the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this lad. The amount of karting trophies he acquired would classify him as a hoarder, but the results and the reputation that came with it classified him instead as a prodigy. And during the time where he was king of the world when the 2010s came along, he was a part of the McLaren Young Driver program, the same program that was used to catapult Sir Lewis Hamilton to eternal glory. You would imagine then, with everything going for him, that Nyck de Vries would be on the Formula 1 grid in no time. Back then, I thought so too. Well, it wasn't quite no time. It was a little longer than that, and a lot had to happen before reaching the top flight of motorsport. But before we delve into that long and torturous route, it's time to preach the gospel again. Surfshark is a VPN service that encrypts all the data that you send through the internet, protecting said data and keeping any Nobel Peace Prize winners from getting at it. Surfshark ain't a one-trick pony though. I mean, we're not talking about Gunther Steiner here. Like, we all love streaming, am I right? We also hate it whenever your streaming services are restricted based on your location. Am I right? Well, with Surfshark, you can change your location, bypassing said restrictions, thereby allowing you access to your favorite content. It can also be a vital tool for those who live in countries that heavily censor their people for whatever their reasons may be. It ain't quite teleportation, but it is about as close as we're gonna get right now. So, here's the skinny. By using my link in the description and using the promo code Josh Ravel, you can get Surfshark VPN for 83% off and 3 extra months for free. That amounts to around about a couple of bucks a month for virtual protection, along with 3 free months and a 30-day money-back guarantee as well. So, what the bloody hell are you waiting for? Oh, you're waiting for the De Vries story, aren't you? Alright, fair enough. Without further ado, for the year 2012, McLaren decided to throw De Vries into Formula Renault, which was probably the predictable choice back in that time. He was teammates with Pierre Gasly, so we could be fairly confident he wasn't going to have an easy time. I mean, you'd imagine so. With a decent amount of coin behind De Vries, he would compete in both the Euro Cup and Northern European Championships. And initially, things did look promising, with a podium in his debut race in the Euro Cup, finishing just behind Daniel Kvyat and ahead of Stoffel Vandoorne. God damn, that podium. His qualifying throughout the year was pretty damn impressive, but not making it to the end of the race in one piece was not the best way of achieving points. Having said that though, he did finish in P5 overall in the championship, the highest of all his teammates. As for that Northern European Championship, he won his first car race there at his home circuit in Assen, though it was a partial campaign, so he never posed a threat in the championship. All a learning experience though, so it could have been assumed with the impressive first year that he would kill it come 2013, right? Well, a switch to arguably a better team for that year should have boosted his chances. Instead, he struggled to hit the heights expected of him in those first few rounds. It was only by around Hungary where he started to wake up. By that time though, too little, too late. The title hunt for him was all but over. Spending a third year in Formula Renault is akin to repeating the 4th grade. For the 5th time. Anything less than dominating both the Euro Cup and Alps championships would have been considered a failure and potentially derailed any chance he had of maintaining his role in McLaren. And luckily for him, despite the likes of George Russell and Charles Leclerc making their debuts, De Vries ran away with both championships in relatively dominant fashion and set him on the path beyond Formula Renault and straight into Formula Renault 3.5, better known to you and I as the World Series by Renault Series. Did I really script that? Plonked at Dams alongside Dean Stoneman. He had a good car, a good team, and a teammate who was worth a damn. But whether it was being slow to adapt or Dams not quite providing a rocket ship, he never found himself in contention for the title that year, although he would win the Rookies Championship, which, you know, it's something. It's respectful enough results. But when he migrated to GP3 for the following season, then results were not so respectful. He was in the best team for that season, but it being the best team, it attracted some of the best drivers. Sure, he himself was one of them, but it also attracted Alex Albon and Charles Leclerc. Both those guys would run away with the championship battle. De Vries' qualifying let him down, and perhaps the results didn't reflect how he drove that year. But in a sport where people only ever remember what you did in your last race, and about how you did on paper, seeing 2 other prospective Formula 1 talents running away from you doesn't look brilliant. It didn't stop him, however, from making the step up to Formula 2 for the next season, planting himself at Rapax with his teammate being Johnny Cecotto Jr. And after he left, he was replaced with Sergio Canamassas. So De Vries wasn't in much danger of being outpaced, but the first few corners were always a nervous affair, lest one of those two adventurous teammates of his ram him from behind. But despite taking his debut win in Monaco, and it being the first win for Rapax since Sergei Sorokin in Silverstone 2015, the question of money started to rear its ugly head, even for the likes of De Vries, who was supposedly McLaren's golden child. Supposedly, or maybe the emergence of Lando Norris was making them think, why do we still have you? I'm guessing that Louis Delatraz looked at Nyck's results and surmised that Rapax was better than where he was at. So, a swap was initiated and De Vries was moved over to the racing engineering outfit and only informed 2 days out from the round in Belgium. Thoughts ran through his mind of, do I quit single-seaters and settle for a life in GT cars? Obviously, here we are today. And that didn't happen. He finished the year 7th in the standings, still putting in some bloody good performances, although the attention lay with Charles Leclerc, who put on one of the best seasons of Formula 2 that we had ever seen. For De Vries, 2018 was going to be the year. I mean, it had to be. He would be moving to Prima, the same team that took Leclerc to the title the year prior. But he would have his work cut out for him, for he had a teammate who would push him to the very edge of his God-given talent. A man who doesn't know the meaning of fear and will sacrifice anything to achieve eternal glory. Sean Gallile. Bruh. I really don't need to tell you how that inter-team battle went, don't I? But here it is anyway. That's not to say that it was a total breeze for De Vries though. He had his problems. Primarily, they were of his own doing. Multiple driver errors which cost him valuable results, arguably cost him at least second in the driver's standings. Whether he would have mowed down George Russell for the title is not so certain. But it was disappointing when you consider the expectations and his failure to meet them. Before the year was done, De Vries drove in the LMP2 class in the World Endurance Championship. He had also been in as an Audi Sport Academy driver since the 2016 season. Perhaps that Formula 1 dream of his was now beyond reach. It certainly looked a little further away when McLaren dumped him from the driver academy before the 2019 season. A third year and a third team. His teammate would not pose much of a threat that year, primarily because the Kremlin hadn't bought the team for him, nor did he have a teammate which would coach and lay down for him the whole way. The season got off to a slow start, but then momentum started to swing his way. He won a string of races from Catalunya to Le Castellet, but consistency was the main thing. He just kept finding that podium, and after winning the feature race in Sochi, he'd done it. He had become the Formula 2 champion. He had achieved what he set out to do. And now, 7 or 8 or whatever years it was after setting out in Formula Renault in 2012, his Formula 1 dream could potentially come true. No. Instead, he'd end up landing in Formula E, the perpetual merry-go-round for talented drivers either priced or politicized out of Formula 1. He would be driving for Mercedes, a pivotal signing that would affect the rest of his career. If he knew it then, he's a genius. If he didn't, let's just pretend he was a genius. He spent the year finding his feet in the category, but it wasn't as if his teammate Stoffel Vandoorne was leaving him behind. In fact, a lot of the time, De Vries would out-qualify him. But I mean, obviously, finishing 11th in the driver's standings is not quite as good as finishing in 2nd, which is where Vandoorne was. De Vries would have liked to improve on that 11th placing in the standings, and for the next year, he did improve it. Quite drastically. Despite 89 million retirements that year, he defied the odds to become the FIA Formula E World Champion. And it was his performances here, as well as in the World Endurance Championship, that put him back on the radar for Formula 1. So, maybe there was a chance here. It's a very outside chance, but a chance no less. Mercedes liking the fact that he was a world champion for them, and thus gave him a role in the championship, not stupid enough to use fan boost. He would act as one of the reserve drivers for the Mercedes Formula 1 team alongside Vandoorne. De Vries' 2022 Formula E season was about as successful results-wise as the previous year, but he was nowhere near the title hunt, which didn't make a hell of a lot of sense then, and even as of the writing of the script, it still doesn't. But whatever the case, he was still fancied for Formula 1 roles, even if just in a testing fancy. Mercedes were desperate to bring him into Formula 1, but while they waited for a seat to open up, there was a compromise in place to better prepare the Flying Dutchman for his seemingly inevitable debut. Thanks to new rules in 2022 which demanded every driver sit out at least one FP1 session and have their car given to someone with no Grand Prix experience, and Mercedes connections with other teams, De Vries rolled out an FP1 for the Spanish Grand Prix, driving a Williams. Williams, making his Grand Prix weekend debut, and perhaps a long time coming, even if a proper debut it wasn't. At least, not for this round. After Alex Albon was sidelined with appendicitis, Williams were left scrambling to find a new driver. Not easy, considering this all transpired on Saturday morning. Luckily for them, De Vries was lurking about. In fact, he was constantly lurking about that year. After that Spanish outing, he was given a run with Mercedes in France, and with Aston Martin in, well, this round, actually. So with that, De Vries was drafted in to replace Albon for this round. After over 10 years, and almost an acceptance that Formula 1 might not happen for him, he would finally make his debut, and he would immediately prove his worth. On debut, he out-qualified his teammate. Granted, his teammate was Nicholas Latifi, but you play the hand you're dealt. He advanced to Q2, qualifying in 13th, but thanks to grid penalties, he started that Grand Prix in 8th position. Not an environment that the Williams would be totally comfortable in, but he held his own during the race and drove to a splendid 9th place, winning him praise around the paddock and was awarded driver of the day by the fans. The only person that wasn't over the moon about this result was Latifi, who remarked that, 9th was about where the car should have been anyway. Well, if that was where the car was meant to be, why weren't you there, Chief? Huh? Answer that one. Anyway, Albon returned for the next round, and De Vries wasn't really needed anymore. But in what can be regarded as his audition for a Formula 1 seat, he knocked the ball out of the park, ran, caught the ball himself, and shoved it up Latifi's ass to remind everyone that yes, he can drive, and he was good enough for a Formula 1 seat. He ran around with Mercedes in another FP1 session come Mexico, but also filled his time by testing with Alpine in September, and was even on hand as a potential replacement for Lando Norris, who had befallen the peril of Susie's catering in Brazil. But at that point in the season, didn't matter too much for Nyck. His need to impress people in the paddock wasn't so paramount anymore, because one person in that paddock was prepared to take a chance on him. He had caught the watchful eye of Dr. Helmut Marko, who was looking for a replacement for the outgoing Pierre Gasly. With his Monza outing and Marko's refusal to believe in any of the Red Bull juniors, the choice was obvious. On the 8th of October, De Vries was announced as an alphatauri Formula 1 driver for the 2023 season, and with that, his quest to become a Formula 1 driver was complete. A quest that started out in 2012, where he was a McLaren junior driver and double world karting champion, a career thereafter that perhaps didn't meet some people's expectations, going on to become a Formula 2 champion, only to not get an F1 drive, end up in Formula E with other drives in endurance racing, even racing in the 24 Hour of Le Mans. Not that that's a bad thing. And then, almost by chance, he finally gets a shot at the big time. Not the conventional route, but he finally achieved his dream of reaching Formula 1. So, how will he perform now that he's found his home here? Who knows? I know that I'm not going to torture y'all with another prediction. That comes next week. All I can say is, Nyck de Vries, welcome to the big time. Took you long enough.